Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to another Civ 7 guide. I'm Lord Forwind, and this is a video on another 10 tricks and tips for Deity or other difficulties, just to help you guys get better at the game. So all this is going to be time-stamped, so you have the ability to jump to what you want to. For those of you who are going to stick around here, please do like, comment, and subscribe. It's very useful to me. And let's jump right into it. Okay, first tip. For those of you who don't know it, and I'm just reiterating it for those of you who do as well, tech is king. If there is one thing you want to gather in-game, it is technology points, or science points, technically. Culture is good. Don't get me wrong, culture gets you access to wonders and stuff, but science is significantly more important. Having good science feeds into a lot of your other victories. Obviously, in the modern era, you need rocketry just to win a science victory, but other things you need it for if you're going to win an economic victory. You need to be able to get to mass production and industrialization for rail stations and factories. If you want to conquer lots of stuff, getting the additional settlement limits as well as better troops are important. The only one it really doesn't help you win is culture victories. However, the additional yields that you get from doing masteries at all ages, I'm just using the modern era as example, will help you even with culture victories. Tech is king. If you have to focus in something, culture or tech, almost always you're going to want to take tech. If you can't have tech, you're going to struggle at lots of the victory conditions. Still possible. Tech, tech, tech. I can hardly talk about it enough. Okay, tip number 2, walls for defense. Now this might seem obvious, but walls are how you're going to defend against invasions by stronger enemies. Too many people are used to like RTS games where you fight out in the open because your defenses don't necessarily always hold. This is not one of those games. As you can see right here in this game, which is why I picked it, I had Chang'an. Initially, Isabella here had Carthage. Now, for those of you who don't know, Isabella Carthage with a natural wonder is absolutely terrifying. So she invaded me like 3 or 4 times in the first stage and got nowhere. Why? Because I had taken Chang'an here and I had built walls. I've since upgraded them, but between the walls and range units, which is the other component, range units inside walls are very, very powerful. I was able to hold her off, station your melee units just outside of your walls so that her melee units can't get to your walls, and then kill all her range and other stuff from a distance. If she starts using range, you pull your melee units back a bit, let them attack your wall districts. Remember, a wall districts, once the walls are depleted, then they can shoot your unit. And to take it, they have to deplete the walls and kill your unit to take a district. Build walls on your cities where you're going to defend. Sadly, the town focus fort towns can be very useful if you've got a single town under attack, but the reality is don't use this one. It's not worth it. But all your cities, and ideally you should make a town on the enemy's border a city, just so you can train troops there easier, as well as build more walls and stuff. Very good to defend with. So build your walls for defense. It's never going to steer you wrong. I have yet to lose a city to, say, even barbarians, hostile, independent powers, if it had walls. They just suck at taking them, even at high levels. Tip 3, ageless buildings. Now, most of you should know this, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. So some of your buildings, when you create them, have this little descriptor, as you can see for gristmill and sawmill, that says ageless. The early one you're going to get is, say, the brickyard or the granary. What does ageless mean? It means it does not lose its yields and does not become overbuildable when you change in ages. Now, obviously, ageless buildings have a larger benefit in the long run than not ageless buildings, which usually have a higher yield within that age. So it is tempting to not build ageless buildings. The reality is, if you're playing at Deity, you're probably going to start to fall behind the AI. As you can see here, this is the first turn of the modern era. I am significantly behind in both culture and science, even though I would go on to win this one. I wasn't winning from having a good start. Now, the other thing to realize is with ageless buildings, you cannot overbuild. Sounds obvious, correct? You can make some horrible mistakes that will really screw you up if you don't think ahead. So as you can see right here, I've got gristmill and sawmill and medieval walls in the same tile. Perfect. This tile will never change. If there was future ages, it still wouldn't change. Now, if we look over to here, this was a bit of I would say a bit of a mistake on my part. I have a stone cutter and I have a grocer in it. Or I'm building a grocer, meaning I'm building over something. This is not the ideal usage of an ageless tile. Similar, I have here granary and observatory. I would have been much better off putting the granary and the stone cutter in the same district. The reason is if you play with a civ that has a unique quarter, as in you build 2 unique buildings there, you get a unique named quarter. The Forum, for example, of Rome. You want to make sure that you have a tile where you can place it, basically. And if you've got tiles where you've got one ageless building and one non-ageless building, it means you can't overbuild it twice to get that district. So my advice is try to consolidate your ageless tiles if you can. Again, I screwed up some here. Doesn't mean it doesn't function. It's just slightly less than optimal. I think it was Chengdu over here where when I was playing the previous age, I ran across a problem. I couldn't build a unique district just because I had a lot of ageless buildings scattered around and I didn't have a lot of space. Not a big issue if you're sitting in the middle of a plain, say like Carthage, because you have plenty of space. But if you're playing with limited space like Jinyang down here, you're going to run across some trouble, especially if you can't overbuild. And then once you get to the later eras, overbuilding is extremely important because it's almost always a step up. Very rarely building over an area will lose you a yield. It might reduce your science or culture by 1 or 2 or your production, but by and large, the results almost always make it worth overbuilding. So anyway, ageless buildings, try and group them together. Very important. Once you get towards the end of an age, you want to make sure you've got all the ageless buildings you can built in your cities. Feel free to buy them in your towns because towns convert, say, food and production and stuff into gold, depending on how you specialize them. So over the course of the game, assuming you buy the age 1 ageless buildings, by the 3rd age, they'll have kind of paid for themselves. On to the next tip. Tip 4, city placement. So what do I mean by this? I mean there are 2 different rules for placing cities. One when you're fighting the AI, one when you're playing other people. The first rule about the AI is to realize the AI is, at the moment, kind of bad about where it puts its cities. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look here at Hippo, which was settled by Isabella, who was Carthage in the first stage, this is an absolutely terrible city. Like, if you were a human player, you would not settle this tile, really. Why did Isabella do it? Well, she got access to 2 resources. I think there was another one at some point. So 3 resources. That's why she settled there. No human player would want to settle there. They would probably want to settle either more to the side or more up, mainly because you have no place to build a city, which is why Hippo has stayed a town this whole game. On the other hand, you also will see AIs do towns like this. So long as an AI can get a resource, they usually will settle towns. Like, this is the final age of this game. By the time it ended, there was, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or so more towns settled in this tundra territory, which is pretty terrible, just so that the AI could gain access to these goods, basically. Here's another example. Terrible city, basically. They did it basically to get access to I think they were trying to get the foxes, but I stole them. So if you have space on your borders, like here, Machu Picchu or Pichu, assume the AI is going to settle them, even though they're terrible. which means the rule when you're playing against AI is if you don't want them settling inside your territory, you want to make sure you place your towns 6 tiles apart so that there's no space in between them to be settled, and you want to make sure that you cover up resources when you expand, because if you leave any, there goes the AI settling a terrible city location for a singular resource. Now, versus human players, the calculus changes a bit. Human players don't tend to settle bad cities. In fact, when playing against other people, defensibility becomes far more important. Now, I'm using this game as an example, even though it was versus AI, just because it illustrates decent city placement. So right here, Chengdu, if I was playing against a human player and I was considering all the rules of forward settling or not, this would be an actually decent city. It's close enough that there's a road between my capital and it, meaning I can do quick reinforcements. More importantly, there's mountains and water. Flat plains or flat grassland is arguably the easiest thing to invade. You can just rush right across it. There's very few natural defenses. Even rough terrain would help on defense. This is actually a good spot here. So this mountain range here, first off, it compresses anyone passing towards my capital to 2 tiles, which is why there's a great wall there. But here, if I was attacked, I wasn't, I would definitely wall this tile and these tiles right here, station some range units nearby, and let anybody try to, either they would bombard me from across the water, then take the district, at which point I would immediately shoot them and kill them, or they would try invade through the land, where I could have the advantage of range units being embarked. Do remember the AI gets a huge defensive bonus while embarked. Human players do not get that, meaning naval invasions, unless they're overwhelming or done in secret, tend to be easily defeatable by range units and walls. Now, other things to realize, when you place a city, it's going to expand to 3 tiles outwards. So do place it in such a way that you get as many resources as possible. This is even more prominent in the first stage, where you have to collect 20 resources for the Golden Age, the Silk Road Legacy Tree. In later ages, resources become less important unless you're going for factory goods, which is extremely important to snag. Basically, you're going to want to consider where the game recommends settlements. They actually do a decent job of calculating what would be a good settlement. You know how when you click on the settler, it gives you the places to settle. You have to make up your mind if you're going to settle on freshwater, blue tiles, or yellow tiles, which are not freshwater. My rule of thumb is you want to settle on light blue, unless settling on yellow gives you either a more defensible city, better access to resources, or is just a better city location, as in you're going to develop it into a city. Placing towns can be done a little bit more recklessly. Since everything starts as a town, you can then choose. But please don't be the AI and settle dumb towns just for singular resources. It's not worth it unless you're in the new world and you're going for treasure resources, in which case getting some of those can be worth it, so you get treasure fleets. Otherwise though, don't do it. Okay, tip 5, mementos. If you play multiplayer, there is of course an option to disable mementos, and it's considered slightly more balancing because if you've played someone a lot, you tend to have better mementos. However, if you're going to play against the AIs, it's usually worth taking the mementos. So we're going to go over what makes a good memento selection. And I will start off with pointing out the fact that the +1 culture attribute here and the +1 science attribute point are almost never wrong selections. Because each age you'll get one, meaning these are basically 3 culture and 3 science by the end of the game. And as we've already talked about, culture is king. However, science is king, culture follows up. So that's usually a decent choice. Now, there are other mementos you may wish to pick. I will highlight some of the ones that are particularly good, and I'll explain kind of roughly why some of them are not good. A lot of people like this Corpus Juris Civilis. You get it very early. You get an additional social policy slot. It's not the worst one in the world. However, it does fall off a little bit as the game continues, especially if you're playing right. You get lots of happiness, you get more social policy slot. I find it to be a bit of a trap for new players. Another one, for example, is an economic attribute point. Unless you're going to go for an economic victory and just buy things in the last stage, +3 economic attribute points is not going to win you the game. 3 diplomatic attribute points, a similar issue. I will point out the fact that the +1 militaristic attribute is slightly better because it can give you defense, it allows you to increase your city limit, etc. If you're going for a warmonger, the odds are you're going to want to pick that memento. Now, other interesting ones, where is it? Right here, bifocals. You get it from Franklin, I think level 3 or something. Gain 50 influence when after you research a tech or civic mastery. This can be extremely powerful, especially for civs that are heavy into science. Ada Lovelace in particular springs to mind, since she wants to complete both tech and civic masteries. This would allow her to generate a rather absurd amount of influence to get independent powers / city states on your side. Other people may not want to take this. If you're a warmonger, probably not going to be very useful, but it would be a nice little boost of influence. Now, another one here, Eagle Banner, scientists get science per great work. Sounds great. There are better ones, just because you're never really going to display 10 great works in a city. 10 great works is quite possible to do. But unless you're going to focus on getting the cultural legacies, or at least initially, the science one followed by culture in the future ages, this is going to be rather difficult. And it doesn't give you an advantage up front, which something like the science attribute point does. Other important ones to point out, if you are playing Isabella, this is one of the mementos you're going to want to take because it gets doubled with her natural wonder benefit. Almost no one else is going to want to take this. +2 gold per age on natural wonders. It's not bad, but you have to have natural wonders. Isabella is guaranteed a natural wonder, so it's very powerful. Now, some of the mementos that people kind of sleep on are mementos similar to this Dotaku one. Gain 50 science when you spend an attribute point on the science attribute tree. It doesn't sound amazing, and it arguably could be much better. It can be used early on to combine with a science attribute point to get you a huge tech boost initially at the beginning of each age. Sadly, it doesn't scale up as well as some of the others, but can in fact be useful. There are quite a few other ones that are semi-useless. There is culture from science specialists. There's also one that's, I think, one tech from specialists. This one right here, though, deserves some special mention. Corona Civica, you get it from Augustus, I think level 2 or 3. +1 settlement limit per age, but 50% convert to city costs. If you want to be a warmonger and you're on a map larger than like small or tiny, you're either going to have to burn down lots of the lands you take, meaning if you're playing against AI, they will literally just resettle them. But if you want to hold on to them, this is, of course, +3 settlements in the final age. It falls off in the later ages, but in the early ages allows you to take another settlement or 2 without having to worry about going massively over your settlement limit. I particularly like it on extreme warmonger games. Can be good. This is an example of a relatively useless momentum. Your commanders who get killed recover faster. You shouldn't be losing commandos. So I think I've given you guys a good selection of what bad ones and some good ones look like. I'm going to point out some important combos. This Colada and Tizona you get from Isabella again, I believe. +2 combat strength for units adjacent to 2 or more enemy units. It doesn't sound amazing until we remember that Deity and even Immortal and stuff, the AIs have a combat bonus. About, I think it's 8 in Deity. I haven't bothered to check in a while. +2 combat strength goes a long way to balancing that out. And the odds are if you're fighting the AI, they have lots of units. So the odds are you will be adjacent to 2 enemy units. Could be quite useful there. Augencore here. Augencore Arrowhead, +1 movement for range units. If you've got a specialist range unit and you're intending to have specialist range units the whole game, can be useful. Otherwise, not nearly as good as actual numbers. That kind of bears out. This one is another example of a bad one, unless you're playing someone like Harriet Tubman, who gets bonuses. +1 migrant whenever you complete an espionage. She's kind of an espionage leader. Sadly, espionage is heavily nerfed at the moment and not that good. This is one +10 culture towards studying civic masteries. Not game breaking, but if you're playing someone like Ada Lovelace who wants to get civic masteries, especially if you combine it with bifocals or something, you can generate some pretty absurd culture and influence generation. This is one here. If you take this and you play Rizal or Rival, can never pronounce the guy's name, this is a great one to combo with him. So if you know your leaders, which was in my first tips from the first video, look through all the mementos. Obviously, there's a ton of them. Some of them are ignorable. In my experience, each leader, their first memento you unlock tends to strengthen their particular leader bonuses. Their second memento tends to be kind of terrible, but the third one you can get tends to be significantly better. Obviously, there's also ones you get from just playing the game. Royal Game of Ur is extremely strong. You have to get to level 49, meaning you're playing like 700-800 hours before you unlock it. If you can, this is great. Even at deity level, 10% is literally no joke, and you're going to be outpaced all the time anyway. So that's my advice with mementos. When in doubt, science and culture. If you've got specific bonuses towards, say, civic masteries, I'm using Ada as an example because she's so clear. There are other examples. Confucius loves specialists, so +1 culture, faster growth rate in cities per specialists is a decent combo with him. Brush and Scroll I find not to be as good as, say, Altar Set. So you could just pick one and ignore the other. Obviously, we talked about combos for Isabella. Combat strength is never a problem. If you think you're going to be invaded all the time, militaristic attribute, very powerful. If you're playing someone like Amina, who gets combat strength in plains and desert, you can have another one, meaning you will control all plains and deserts. This would be an example of one you could take, but might not want to because she's already got a fairly substantial bonus to it. This is not the type of bonus doubling down on it will help you win the game, usually. If you are concerned about finding natural wonders and stuff, Imago Mundi here, +2 sight instead of 1 for scout, search, and lookout abilities, can be extremely useful for scouting the world. Afterwards, though, it kind of falls off hard. In my opinion, you're better off just building another scout. Anyway, that's it for this tip. Learn your mementos, pick ones that do combos. When in doubt, science and culture. Tip 6. Production buildings early. Sorry about the size here. It's kind of running off. I'll fix that here. You want to build production buildings early, especially if you want a warmonger. But let's start. Why do you want to build a production building early? So this is an example of a game where I've already got off to a pretty decent start. For those of you who watched my first tip video, you know I went on to conquer basically this whole region. But this is prior to that. This is a city with 29 production, and yes, that is a very good number to start with. So let me restart here. If we look at Pathragada, which is a town, so let's be aware of that, it's got about a 5 production. It's not good. 5 production means even if I turned it into a town, it would take a long time to build anything. However, you do have buildings like Sawpit, like brickyards, which are ageless. They give you additional production. You can also get stuff like barracks and stuff, which will give you more production. You want to build it early on, even if you're going for a peaceful culture science one, just for the fact that it allows you to build things faster. Yes, it takes several turns to build. Usually the return over the course of the game is almost always worth it, especially if you get some of these ageless ones. Brickyard is a particular favorite because it lasts the whole game, and as you reach science techs, you'll get bigger yields from it, meaning it compounds its strengths. You want to build them early. Sometimes I will even build, as you can see right here, I built a saw pit in my palace tile even before I built a granary. Just for the simple reason that building the saw pit allows me to build the granary faster. If you're lucky enough to get anything production from, say, like a goody hut or something, and you're building a production building, then it even becomes a bigger benefit. So if you're going to explore stuff, sometimes have a production building ready. The other reason to build production buildings, if you're going to be a warmonger. So I talked about in my first video, which if you haven't seen it, go watch it. As a warmonger civ, you have a choice: forward settled people or don't. If you don't, you got to take land from them. And this is an example of one where, as you can see, I have quite an army ready to invade Ada over here. And yes, war does break out not long after this. I declare war, I take it, all's good. By not forward settling her, I have to have an army. She has an advantage in science and culture, meaning by building the army, by building the production buildings, I can then outpace her to have a larger army to do damage against her. And that is actually going to lead into our next tip very quickly here. Tip 7, why go to war? I suppose I could have called it War, What Is It Good For? After the song. Why do you want to go to war in a Civ game? The calculations in this game are slightly different than the other Civ games, so it's a good idea to reiterate this point. Why do you go to war? The concept of war, if you look at it as diplomacy by other means, which some people have called that, it is not in this game. War is used, should be used. You could go to war if you just wanted to. Should be used for the purpose of forwarding your victory. So knowing what you're going to go to victory, which I talked about in my first video, is extremely important. Victory can be hard to reach against the AI at high difficulties because they have such an advantage both to combat and production. However, if you go to war with a Civ, you're going to, assuming you're winning on the battlefield, which of course is not a given. Even if you're not winning on it, you're going to force the Civ to place or move troops towards you or defensively position themselves. You'll be able to fight them over influence. So for example, clearly Ada is ahead of me in this game. In fact, it gets even more annoying till I start conquering her. I cannot match Ada's production of science or culture. That's the sheer reality of it. At high levels, the AI usually outpaces you unless you're doing some absurd combos and get very lucky with cities and locations. Therefore, you have to come up with a way to cut them down to size or just always be behind. Going to war willy-nilly just to reduce AI's progress is not usually the best solution. Works better against human players. And sorry, I'm getting a little off topic here, but why go to war? You go to war if you're behind in science or culture, to either force them to slow down their science and culture productions to match your military units, or the other option is you go to war to take their stuff. This game, for example, I'm about to invade and wipe out Ada's territories, which will net me 3 towns, although Athena will be quickly turned back into a city, which will significantly make up the gap I'm behind. Most of them have 4 or 5 cities. I only have 2 because I chose to go warmongery. Once I conquer her, I would swiftly move on to invade the others, and all of a sudden, I think I end the age with like 11 cities because others get settled. So it makes a huge difference, the war in this circumstance. However, if I was a peaceful Civ, say Benjamin Franklin or Himiko, who kind of want to be friends with people so they can get extra science and other diplomatic endeavors going to war does not make sense for them. In fact, for them, you want to avoid war. So why go to war with them? The answer is don't really go to war unless you absolutely have no choice. Like you get massively forward settled and you're being starved out, you may have to go to war. Just be aware that your opponents are probably going to know that you're being choked out. If you think back to the game I showed earlier in this with Confucius, where Isabella had forward settled me in a terrible location, she was going to go to war with me, so I started the war against her in one of the first stages, so I had an advantage. I was able to strike back, kill out of her units before she was ready, and eventually I won the war. So going to war is not something one should do on a whim. It should be for a clear objective. Take the stuff, slow down the enemy, or just raid and pillage to put them behind. If you play something like Bulgaria, it can be extremely powerful. If you're a warmonger, though, you should be going to war pretty often. The issue you may run across as a warmonger is having too many wars going. So it may behoove you at some point to make peace, take a town, finish off someone else, and then come back. So sometimes you don't want to fight, especially if you're already in a tech or science lead. Fighting doesn't get you much. If you're behind, you probably will need to start wars. Or you're a warmonger, which of course is an exception to most advice. On the note of war, let's move on to tip number 8, commanders, and specifically commander usage. So commanders, of course, in this game are extremely useful. They give you bonuses to your troops. They also serve basically as a transportation for large numbers of units without having to take up multiple tiles. They are particularly good at hiding units. They have a lot of benefits. So the tip here is use your commanders early and often. So out of your starting civics, you get a free commander at discipline. And my advice for a lot of people is take discipline before you go mysticism, just so you have an army commander. Once you have an army commander, ideally, you're going to look for a hostile independent power city-state nearby. Take about 2 warriors and a slinger. Go farm XP. Against barbarians, you can usually get your leader up to level 2, just fighting hostiles, independent hostiles. I advise you try and get as many level 2 commanders as you can. Obviously, commanders are expensive. Basically, if you're a warmonger, you're going to have several. If you're peaceful, maybe 1, maybe 2. 2 would be my recommendation. And you want to get them leveled up, mainly because of the benefits you get. So, what should you pick for a commander? Well, I'll make this extraordinarily easy for everybody. The red line right now is very strong, especially at higher difficulty levels. The first one is probably the best single starting one. You unpack the units, they all get a move, meaning you can move a long distance, deploy them, and they can then attack. If you don't have this, you have to deploy, wait a turn. If you deploy in range of the enemy, they're going to get a free turn of attacks on you. Extraordinarily powerful. The next level here, this is where you have to choose. Do you want to go infantry combat strength and cavalry combat strength, or do you want to go range and siege? If you've got a unique range unit, like you're the you're the Han, you get 2 canoes, obviously you're probably going to want to go ranged. If in this case I'm Persia, I have immortals, which are extraordinarily good, I definitely go infantry. You're going to probably want to finish this tree and get to assaults here. 5 combat strength for units within a radius at full health, very strong. And then you can combine it with order and just get another 5 combat strength for land units in the command radius. Remember, playing at Deity, AIs have huge combat bonuses. This goes a long way to balancing that out. The sooner you can get a commander to 5 or even 6, the better. Now, some of the special leaders, in this case Persia, get some of these trees unlocked already. The Romans get Bastion, which is a little bit, in my opinion, less useful. So just be aware that those guys will have more advantages. If you play Trunchrak she gets 3 commander levels on her first commander immediately, meaning she doesn't have to farm up, and she still starts off with a pretty powerful commander. Do be aware of commander rushes with her. After you've completed the red line, where do you go here? It depends what you're doing. If you're struggling in the war, getting 1 point into Bastion, 2 combat strength when defending, very powerful, very useful. The rest of these trees here are for if you're getting sieged in cities. Fortified in cities, fortifications if you're fortifying on the map, which ideally you should avoid defending out in the open and focus on defending near towns and cities for the bonuses, and healing after attacking. Makes melee units viable, helps reduce the damage your range units take from enemies. The red line, this is the green line. The green line is decent. However, before you go into that, because these are the two combat ones, I highly recommend a point in maneuver. The reason is it lets your commander move further and ignore terrain restrictions, meaning all of a sudden your commanders basically become like cars or even like rocket cars, because you'll race across the map, be able to deploy your troops quickly and then strike. Unbelievably good. Now further down it becomes slightly less useful unless you're going to do like flanking bonuses and everything else. But 1 point in maneuver is usually enough. Logistics, basically train more units, make them cheaper, allow you to have more units in the army. Always a nice thing if you're fighting a lot. Better healing can be good, but my recommendation, red line first, maybe a point into green, definitely a point into, I think this is the orange line, and honestly the yellow line, which is leadership. Unless you've got very small territory like 2-3 settlements and cities, leadership is less useful in general. It's more for defense and everything else. Now, another point that I see people neglecting is using their commander's attack abilities. Let's see if I can actually highlight one. No, I cannot. Your commander, when you're in a war, will have various options down here, like focus attack, focus defense, focus a range attack. You're going to want to be using those constantly. Ideally, your commander should be situated in such a way that it's touching all 4 units in its army that you've unlocked by default. Obviously, these 2 are locked unless you get on the upgrade path. You want your commander in the thick of things, but not in a position where it can get killed, which usually means it's sitting behind your lines on range units. Once you do that, though, the best of the commanders, basically command orders, where you order something and your units carry it out, is the ranged one. It gives additional combat strength. It really focuses all your units fire on something. It's what makes a walled town with a commander in it and archers extremely hard to take, because those archers hit harder than normal, or any range units. I'm just using archers as an example. The focus attack can be extraordinarily useful if you've got a weak town center or something without walls, or even with walls but they're damaged, to get a sudden burst. I would not, of course, attack cities or towns with walls with melee units. If you can avoid it, better off using range or siege units. Siege units also get the benefit from the focus range fire, so can be extraordinarily powerful in terms of battering down defenses. Basically use the orders that you have at the bottom of the screen here. Remembering, of course, you can pack and unpack up here. Do be aware, though, if your commander gets attacked while your units are inside the army, they will also take damage, so try to avoid that. So get a leader, use it early and often if you're fighting a war or even a minor skirmish on your borders. Assuming it's not versus independent powers and your leader's not already like 2 or 3, your leader should be there siphoning up the XP. If your leader dies, it will reappear after a certain number of turns. Be aware that that can be very devastating, so try and avoid your leaders. If you see enemy commanders, definitely try and take them out. It will reduce the combat strength of the enemy. AIs in particular are very bad about protecting their commanders, but extraordinarily good at targeting yours. Tip 9, resource usage. So one of the new things really added that makes a difference in Civ is using your various resources and slotting them in your towns and cities. So let's just go over the basics. Towns can slot 1. Specifically, they have to slot bonus resources, which actually I don't have any here, I don't think. And cities can insert all resources. I think they start with 2 or 3 slots if it's your capital. To get more, you need either build marketplaces or get camels. As you can see here, I have a lot of camels. It's a little bit absurd. putting them in various towns and cities gives you bonuses, some of which have better bonuses if they're not in your capital. Doesn't mean you don't want to insert them in your capital to begin with. There's also Empire and Treasure resources. Empire ones do not get slotted into a town or a city. So if you're going for the Silk Road Legacy in Age 1, which is the economic in slot 20 resources, Empire resources don't count. Just in case you guys are wondering why that doesn't happen, they don't actually get slotted into anything. Now, what do I mean by using your resources? Because some people may go, oh yeah, I insert them where I can. What I mean is trying to set up combos. Assuming, and this was one of the better examples I could find offhand, it's not perfect, but my apologies. Stuff like Silk is a plus 10% culture to whatever city it's in. Sounds great. If you can imagine having 3 or 4 of those, 10% in 4 towns, 4 cities, okay. If you put them all in the same city, that's a 40% towards it. If you put them in your capital, which in the first stage is usually your best city, you can start getting some absurd boosts to culture. There's also incense, which is, I believe, 10% science. So if you see silk or you see incense scattered on the map, pick it up because it's some of your best resources. Try and slot as many of the same into your city. Later on, you're going to want to obviously have cities that are customized towards like production, towards science, towards culture. Towards science, stick the incense ones in it. The 2 cultures, put the silk, etc., etc. The other one to be aware of is you're going to want a production city. Now, all cities benefit from production. In fact, the small cities that you've just turned from towns are going to benefit from production even more. So it can be worth grabbing something like gypsum. If you get some of the other ones that give production bonuses, inserting those into your new cities, give them a bit of boost so they can build more production buildings and accelerate the growth. If you're building a wonder in a city, definitely make sure you shift your production resources into that city so you can build it faster. In this case, I'm building wonders in Wasset. I would not move my production resources out of it because I already have several wonders. In fact, I think I got all 7 in this game. Having the production resources make a big difference, but later on I would definitely want to snag something like incense over here for the production value. I will highlight marbles as an Empire resource because I think they're extremely important. Plus 10 production towards wonders. If you can get a couple marbles in the first stage, it goes a long way to getting several wonders. Later on, though, it does fall off a bit. The other one to highlight is wine. Wine, if you can get multiple of it, is extraordinarily powerful. Extra happiness in your capital and 10% culture in your capital when in a celebration. Stacks absurdly well with silk. If you can get silk and then several wine and then you trigger it, you can get I was playing a game with one of my friends. He jumped from like 80 culture in the first stage to like almost 200 when he went into a celebration and properly slotted his resources because of all the silk and wine resources he had. It was something to see. It was a little frustrating to watch considering I think I had 60 culture at the time, but that's the way it goes. So learn your resources, what they do, and make sure you shift them around. A common mistake is people take them, leave them in place, don't really think about them. You should be actively keeping an eye on them. Obviously, if you get camels, putting them all in one city and then shifting all your resources in the city is going to give you a mega city, which can be very useful. But sometimes it's worth shifting things around. Once your city's built up, move the production on to another one. One way I kind of determine when I'm going to turn a town into a city is, have I built all the stuff in the city that I need to build? At which point, upgrading a town to a city so I can start upgrading that one tends to be the move I make. Okay, tip 10, and sorry I don't have a very good example for this one. I've looked around, I haven't found one. City-state bonuses. Technically, they're independent powers. City-state is easier to remember, and it's the way it was in the other Civ games. So when you befriend a independent power / city-state, you get a bonus. The bonus, of course, depends on what type of city-state it is. In fact, actually, I can show you this. 1 second. Interestingly, it looks like I did pick the correct example. So I have, since you just looked, I have befriended this city-state, and so I get to pick a suzerain bonus. Obviously, there are different bonuses based off what type of city-state it is. In this case, it's a cultural one. There's science, there's gold, and then there's military. Out of which is almost always worth, if you can, to try and get a culture and a science city-state fairly early, even before you get money and or military ones, because there's a suzerain bonus that the earlier you pick it, the better, and that is receive a free civic or tech if it's a tech city-state when you become suzerain of a city-state, including this one. This is a very powerful tip at deity level where you're almost always behind in culture and tech to the AIs. If you can get this early on and you can snag several city-states, not a given. In this case, in this game, I think this was my second city-state, mainly because the AI had already snagged some and I hadn't found other ones. Getting a free civic or city-state is very powerful. Be aware that it picks, from what I can tell, it picks the lowest cost city tech or civic, including masteries. So if you're going to get one of these bonuses, make sure you've cleaned up easy masteries, otherwise you're going to get a smaller bonus. But if you do get one and it's a full tech, feels really good, especially if you get one of the more expensive techs. And that stacks. So once I befriend this one, if I befriend another city-state, I'll get a civic for that one as well. So that is arguably the most powerful bonuses you can get from the tech and the culture city-states at the beginning. Now, another one to point out is, specifically in Age 1, and I think in Age 2 as well, you'll get the option to get one of the great works. So in the first age, a codex, second age, an artifact. A relic, and I think in the third age, an artifact. In the first age, getting a codex from a science city-state can be very useful. If you get it early, it's extra science. I tend to pick the free tech first because that's a guaranteed bonus, assuming you get another city-state. But getting a codex early on will reduce your need to research as many tech masteries to complete the science legacy. In the second age, with a relic, it's a little bit less useful unless you didn't get a good religion, because if you got a good religion, you should have no trouble getting your relics. And in the third age, getting an artifact can be very powerful. But by and large, the free civic is good. Once you take it, the bonus is gone, so the sooner you get it, the better. Obviously, culture towards monuments, very useful if you have monuments, for example, here. Sometimes the unique improvements are good, but by and large, they're the weak ones, and plus productions and stuff, far less useful. My recommendation is get a science city-state first, just for tech, because tech is king, then get a cultural one, or vice versa. Either way, you'll get a bonus or two for each of those, at which point you're almost definitely going to want to get a military city-state. In fact, if you think you're going to war with a AI at like Deity early on, getting a military city-state really helps. You can get bonuses towards range, towards melee units. One of my particular favorite things to do is play Greece and get Age of Heroes bonus from the military city-states, plus 50% commander experience. Stacks amazingly well with one of the Greeks' policies, which gives extra commander experience, and you can get like level 8 or 9 commanders in the first age. It's absurd. The money city-states are less useful. They do get you access to, I believe you can pick, I think it's lapis lazuli, which is like 4 production, 5 gold, which is really good if you can snag it. But by and large, you're going to want to pick bonuses that get you big stuff, like techs, like civics, even like a codex or two. All very useful. Extra combat strength is always good. If I was to rank them importance of survival at a deity game level, science is first, probably military second, then culture, and definitely last in almost every circumstance is the economic city-states. They don't have amazing bonuses. So you take one, you pick it, ta-da. Oops, that's the wrong one. I get a civic, which is nice. It saves me multiple turns. And once, assuming you realize that the production cost for Techs and civics is really high. A free one saves you like 5-10 turns of research. Very powerful, always worth taking. The goal is to get the biggest bonus possible, and those are the biggest bonuses. And anyway, that will be it for this guide. If you've enjoyed it, definitely do like and comment with your own tips. Tell me what I did wrong. A lot of people always tell people what they've done wrong, but you can also tell me what I did right. And regardless, I'll see you all in another series or guide. Bye for now.